And that pretty much summarises our overview of beta. So we're going to open up the floor to questions and answers shortly. Thank you very much for listening today. We do also have on the next slide, we will circulate these slides, but we've got a really useful kind of library of all the links and useful resources there for you too. So I will hand back to Emily.
Thanks, Helen. So yeah, hopefully that's given you a bit of food for thought. I've seen there have been a number of questions coming in through the chat. So I think I'm not sure who from our HESA side, I don't know whether Mel or Lisa, one of you is able to kind of help give a summary. But obviously, if there's anything anyone does want to use, obviously feel free to raise your hand and we can answer questions that way as well. Or you can continue to add things into the chat, whichever is your preference.
It's actually going to be me, Emily. So hi everyone.
Thanks, Kate.
I'm Kate Leach, member of the liaison team, and just to reiterate what's been said already, you know, liaison are here to help you. One of our unofficial mottos is no such thing as a silly question. So, you know, if it's something you want to know, get asking basically, and we'll be happy to help. Just deal with a couple of the quick questions. Somebody asked, will the slides be shared after the session? Yes, they will, and the recordings too will be available for you, so you can look at those. Something else I saw that I can answer, has the IDS role invitation been issued yet? No, it hasn't. We're going to wait until the system opens and then we'll send them out as quickly as we can after that. And when will the XML data entry tool be available? Emily, when are we expecting?
Yep, so I can answer that one. So we are hoping that it will be out at the same time that as the first release goes in the next week or so. If it's not the exact same day, it will be a few days afterwards, but we're expecting that that'll be there right from the get-go.
Thank you. We've got another question about the mention of a mandatory trial period. So wondered if it could be clarified. I know this was mentioned. Could we just say again what's happening about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to say that obviously I know that our website still says that we are looking at doing a mandatory trial, but we've actually been looking at this internally and deciding that we don't need to necessarily do that in the same way. What the intention behind mandatory trial originally was actually is the sort of test of readiness. And given that we've changed away from kind of the first part being around in-year data collection due to the OFS burden review, meaning that those elements are still up to question for providers in England, we took the decision that we were going to do a full retrospective collection in a similar way that we do currently in our current collections. So we can actually manage readiness in a different way. So we are looking to increase, so we'll be putting out readiness surveys. We will also be looking to kind of increase the monitoring that we're doing internally within HESA. So when you attend things like the training that Laura's gone through, we'll be taking a note of that to sort of say, actually, people look like they're doing what providers look like they're doing, all the things that we would expect them to be doing and what they're engaging with. Obviously, yourselves being involved in beta, obviously that gives you a much less risk for us. Obviously, someone that is actively engaging. So we think there are other ways that we can do it. And then also we're looking at putting interim submission dates, so having opportunities that doesn't necessarily tie us specifically to a sort of mandatory trial type requirement. So that will be removed in place of other things. But again, more information will be available on the website in the next couple of weeks on that to give you a full kind of detail of exactly what it is that we're doing in replacement of those.
Okay, a training question, Laura, if you're still here, I don't know if you could take this one.
Yeah.
Will the new training sessions you mentioned also cater for providers who are new and may not have made a return yet under either student or student alternative?
Yeah, absolutely. So the idea of the sessions is that it'll kind of be a little bit of run through everything, you know, the background to the project. We'll go through the submission process at the end, but as an overview. But the bulk of the day will be spent exploring the model. We're going to go through the whole model. We are going to at least touch upon every single field. And the way it will be that I will take you through every single entity and field. And while we're doing that, I will be drawing the parallels between the legacy record, you know, whichever one that session is sort of for audience wise. So if you're a new provider, because we're going to go through everything on both types of session, you can kind of pick a date that's more convenient to you. The only other difference really is because of the sort of audiences that it was designed for. In the student alternative sort of audience-based session, we're probably going to spend a bit more time on returning module data than we are on the student one. So if returning module data scares you, come to the student alternative session. Likewise for the sessions for student contacts, we're spending a little bit more time than on the other session on returning, breaking that engagement down, returning student course session, that kind of thing. So again, if that side of things scares you, come to the student session. But both sessions will go through the whole model. We'll literally go through everything. It'll be a whistle-stop tour, but a calm whistle-stop tour. So yeah, very much for everybody.
Lovely, thanks, Laura. Just another question about new providers. Can you clarify around the use of 21-22 data for new providers who may not have 21-22 data, as they weren't the registering provider then?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. And I think we're kind of wanting to have something that is sort of comparable, so that we can get a kind of we can use our the data that's been migrated from previous years, so we can do kind of our checks across it that way. Obviously, appreciate if you're a new provider, then you won't have that. So actually, it's a case of you can use any data. Again, I think there was a couple of questions in around the sort of uses of real data. This is one that came up quite a lot yesterday as well. So actually, yes, we're encouraging yourselves, where possible, to use real data, just because that gives us a much richer sort of testing basis, because it means that we can really check the kind of data migration work that we're doing, where we'll be doing checks on previous year's data as part of sort of continuity and those sorts of things. But also it means that we know what's being triggered as part of the kind of rules and what we expect how the system will look and behave, and make sure that that is working. But appreciate, obviously, not everyone is going to be in a position that they either feel ready to do that with live data. So if you want to do it with sort of synthetic test data or anonymized data, again, that is absolutely fine. I just think ideally we think you'll get a richer engagement with it if you can use real data, but appreciate not everyone is going to be in a position to do that. So those of you that haven't had a submission for 21-22, or won't be having a submission for 21-22, there are other options for you to put in data that still meets our schema that we need.
Great, you just answered another couple of questions, Emily,
Yes.
there, so that's good. Let's just go. So one question, which data model do we use for beta?
Yep, so there is a beta specific data model. So on the website, obviously, now that we've published the 22056 data model, is that when you go into the coding manual page, there is a another little button, because it will default to the latest version, so the 22056, there is then a tag for the 21056 data model. That is the model that we are using for beta. So that's the beta model. For the first part of the first release of beta, we will be using the 1.1.0 version of the coding manual, and then we'll be looking to move to 1.2.0 of the beta coding manual. But what I will say is the beta 1.2.0 of the coding manual is exactly the same as the 22056 model. So again, and even between those, the sort of 1.1.0 version and 1.2.0 versions, is actually they're very minimal changes. Some of them are around kind of the categories on there, which have come out of sort of the UCAS changes, and then the rest of them I think are all removals of fields. So again, there shouldn't be too much difference between the two. So again, you can pretty much, if in doubt, always use the latest version, because again, that's all going to help you as well when you go into sort of transition phase as well.
Lovely. Couple of quick questions. Will phase 1 run only in February 22 or between February and May 22?
So phase 1 will run. So the way we kind of phased it is actually the platform will just be, once we've opened it, it will be open, and you can engage with it as much or as little as you like from the start. I think we've planned on the assumption that not everyone is going to be able to put massive files and be fully engaged right from the get-go. We're kind of expecting it to be a bit of a slow burn, and then obviously we'll have much bigger engagement towards the end. So the phases are more around actually the software that's available. So again, we will have more functionality that's available once we go into the second phase. So it's not like the kind of phase finishes and then the next one starts. It's kind of, beta is like a continuous process essentially that's open, but at the different phases more functionality will be available. So going into sort of phase 2 is that you'll have the much richer data set coming in from the migrated data that will have gone on. So again, we expect that obviously you'll be able to you'll be able to engage in the system in a different way than you would have been right from the beginning. And again, once we get towards phase 3, and then kind of going through the kind of work that we've done, are kind of that's all towards the sort of sign off and the end of the reference period work, is again that is hopefully then appropriate towards the end of the period in kind of the July time, when we sort of start to get to there.
Lovely. Okay, another quick question. When we mention sign off, what do we mean in beta?
So really good question. So I think really what we kind of mean is actually we want to test that the mechanism around sign off is that we can go through, we know that we can get our data to a suitable position that it can be signed off, that we've got all of our tolerances, all of our issues within the right tolerances, or that we've gone through the overrides, all our issues have been dealt with. We're not necessarily saying that it needs to be like a full sign off in terms of like you have to sort of swear down in blood that it's a true representation, because appreciate obviously this is for testing purposes, but actually we want to be in a position that we can internally for ourselves, that we can test that the sign off process and mechanisms work, that also that you have an opportunity to do that. It also then means that our statutory customers can test that mechanism as well, because they will get kind of interim sort of test deliveries as part of the process, but then they will obviously need to have a full signed off version of that file as part of the delivery. So that's the reason for the sign off. So I know it's a slightly odd situation of obviously it's not a proper sign off in terms of that is signing off that it's a file that can be used for kind of regulatory and statutory purposes, but it's more a case of that we can test the mechanism and the processes behind it.
Lovely. Okay, a few more quick questions.
Yep.
Will continuity be checked?
Yes, I don't know, I'm going to be really unfair. Alice, am I all right to put you on the spot around? You probably answer it better than I can.
Yeah, of course. So we're still going to aim to try and do some of it. That's not to say necessarily that you're going to be, hauled over the coals, particularly if you're using test data, or you're a new provider. There won't be matches. But again, we just want to test as part of beta that we can do all the kinds of quality checks that we would do in a normal year. So we will be trying to do some of that. It won't necessarily be all of the rules in that area, but there will be some that we will be trying to implement. But it'll be perfectly okay if your response is, I'm using test data and that's why these students have disappeared from one year to the next. That's absolutely fine.
Will there be any colour variances in the different versions?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. Alice, do you know at all?
Is this to do with, the colour in the UI? So when you're looking at the system?
I think so. Perhaps the person who wrote the question could give us a bit more information about that one. That would help.
Hi.
Sorry, go on. Yeah.
Yeah, it just on various systems I've worked with, I tend to put obscure colours in a test environment so that it is very obvious to the user that it is a test environment and it's not the same as what they're used to. I don't know the similarities of what your systems are going to look like, so I don't know. That was the reason behind the question.
Okay, so you will see some changes to the user interface as we go through the different phases. You'll start to see, more cohesion. I think there's still elements of the UI design that haven't been rolled out across every component in the system. So you'll start to see it become more cohesive, I think, as we go through beta. When we get to the online validation tool, so we will be putting plenty of signage in there, because that's probably the bigger one that's potentially got cause for confusion, whereas previously if you had the offline downloadable validation kit, you knew very well you weren't in our online system. So we'll be making sure we've got plenty of signposting there so that you know I'm in a test environment, I'm in a sandpit environment, or I'm in the main collection. So we're still working through some of the designs on that, but I think, yes, there will be very clear signage, but the branding will be pretty consistent across, the lovely HESA colour palette will be pretty consistent across all of our sites. But I'm sure we can share more information on the UI and what's going to change with that as we go through the different phases.
Please, thank you.
Lovely. Next question. When will code lists be available for the Data Futures landscape?
Not sure. I don't know.
I was going to say, could we perhaps
we have
have a little bit more information about that?
Yes, sure can. So code lists are available in the current returns cycle, which allows us to populate the values for each of the fields into our system. So HESA provide that. So in the new landscape, there's new fields and there's new data and there's new codes for existing similar fields, but the codes are different. So for example, for ethnicity and for marital status and for lots of other fields, the code values are now different. So will HESA be providing a code list file? It's a standard process that HESA have been providing.
So not in the way that we do at the moment. So currently in our code manual for the sort of 21051 student record, you've got sort of 3 XSD files. You've got the main XSD, you've got the data types, I think, and then code lists. So we've actually rolled them all into one for data futures. So at the moment, we don't have plans to publish a separate sort of code list, but I know we've had the request from a few different providers to say that would be useful. So that's not something that we're going to be able to action immediately, but it's in the backlog for consideration. But if it's causing you any challenges, or you've got a particular case for why you find that file particularly useful as a separate thing, it'd be really handy if you could drop a message through to Liaison so that we could keep that record. But the information that would have been in the standalone code list file should be in the XSD file.
No problem. That's good to know. That's grand. Thank you.
Okay, we've got a few questions about old codes and new codes and mapping and things. If I just sort of read out what we've asked.
Sure.
If there are any samples, or how can we check the new data items and change the translations? Will there be examples so providers can check? In a field like Qualcat, will there be a mapping tool to enable providers to map from one to the other? Somebody said it's taken months of work with migration docs and comparing models manually. So what will there be? What sort of support will there be for that?
So we obviously have published our data migration specification. So we've got the mapping documents there, which obviously someone has alluded to that they've used. In terms of an actual tool that we be providing, that is not something that we would be doing. I know some of the sort of software, if any of you have used a software house, some of them are providing that for their customers. So again, you will need to speak to your sort of third part to your supplier to work out whether that is something that they are doing for you or not. In terms of what we can help with, obviously our Liaison team are kind of on hand to be able to answer any kind of specific questions, but our mappings are there available on the website. They are updated to the latest schema that we're using, that I think now that the version for the 22056 is now up there. So that is kind of what we had expected to do. Appreciate obviously that might not necessarily cover everything that everyone would like to see. So if there is more kind of that we can do in that area that we can try and help with, please do send any of that through to Liaison, and we'll see what we can endeavour to try and do to try and support and help in that area, because we appreciate that is obviously an area that there's a lot of work that needs to go into. So anything we can do to try and help, we certainly would like to look into doing that where we can.
Lovely. Couple of sort of database questions. Somebody asked, can we publish a sample valid XML file? The database developers won't have access to HESA's platform, so we'd like to show them a sample of what they could be working towards. And someone else says they started the database build up. We're following current ERD published in HESA's site. Is there a chance this will have changes in the future? So two sort of questions there.
Yeah, so in terms of the first one, yeah, we had a very similar question yesterday around sort of test files that can be used, just so again you can kind of test that the structure is as we expect it to. So that is something that we are considering about how we do that. Obviously, just to make sure that we can do that in the best way possible. So leave that one with us. But yes, so we've got lots of files that we use internally anyway as part of our testing. So we've got that available. We could just need to work out the mechanism of making that available to you. In terms of the second one, there was an acronym that was used. It was ERD. Is that?
ERD, yes.
Someone's going to. This is where I'm showing my ignorance. ERD. If anyone can, I don't know who asked the question. Whether.
Yes, this is ERD. This is the database diagram for the database.
Right, I see. Okay, so sorry, Kate. Do you mind repeating?
Do you mean entity relationship diagram?
Yeah, that's correct.
That's the one.
That's correct.
Thank you.
So sorry, yeah, the question was, we're following the current ERD published. Is there any chance that this would have changes in the future?
So there's potential that if there is a new requirement that comes out from our sort of customers, or a policy change that means that has to change, then there's a potential that it will. But at the moment, there are no kind of known major changes. It's certainly none for the 22-23 collection that we've published the coding manual for. The only changes that would ever come as part of that would be if there is a policy change that means that we have to react to it straight away and publish it within there, or we find a major concern that comes out of beta that we again need to react to, because we have no other way of what am I trying to look for, of kind of resolving that issue. That would go through our usual kind of BAU processes, where we would go through a full impact assessment to see whether actually it is appropriate to do within those times. But at the moment we are saying no more changes. Any new changes or requirements that come in as part of request from our customers or from statutory customers or regulators, is that they are automatically going into the 23-24 collection at the earliest. But again, that goes through our full impact assessment criterion, and then if it needs to, it'll go out to consultation as we would with any other change.
Lovely. Just a comment for provider, not a question. As a provider with an in-house system, we're challenged with changes to date models and mapping and building a solution within a short time frame. That's the reality for them.
Yeah, I think we've certainly heard that a few times, and anyone that is on the call that is an in-house provider, we do have a specific Teams channel for software suppliers and providers with in-house systems, where we have regular meetings to talk obviously very technical ones. Obviously there's slightly different questions to those of people that are kind of dealing with the data to those that are building actual platforms. So again, if anyone is on the call that isn't part of that and does want to be, if you could put a note into liaison, and we can make sure we can get you added to that, because again, appreciate that is it's obviously very difficult. So again, if there are things that we can share amongst ourselves that are people that are willing to, then hopefully that might help, given that I know it's a really challenging short time frame that we're all working towards.
Okay, just one question. Just to check, the 2021-2 RP will run to 30th of July 22, not 31st. That question. Apologies if they missed the explanation.
No, you are correct. It should be 31st. And yeah, we've just realised it. One of our keen people have messaged me saying, "Oh, this doesn't look right." So yeah, good spot. I would say it's like that we just do it to try and keep you on our toes, but no, that's completely an error at our side, at our end. But no, it will be the 31st, and we will make sure that is updated in all the right places.
And can I just add there, if you do spot anything like that, we're all human, things happen, just do let us know, and then we can check and amend it if necessary. Someone's added another comment about the backward mapping document, suggesting it was last updated in January 21. So if we can update it and add columns to say which legacy field it is, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I need to go back and double check exactly. I'm sure it's been updated before that, but I will leave that one with us. We'll go and check that one and make sure we can get that one updated to the latest version.
Okay, back to the sort of thinking about the data that needs to be returned. If a provider's been returning to Student Alternative for the years, they might not have the data to populate certain fields in beta because it's new. Is that going to be an issue for the pilot at this stage?
No, we can certainly take that one through. Again, we're not necessarily expecting that everyone's going to have sort of full files and full cohorts of files. So again, we need to make sure that obviously we are kind of that it meets the schema, so either as a kind of not known or kind of code. But obviously if the data isn't there, you can either essentially make it up, or you can put it in as a sort of not known code.
Lovely. Okay, just a sort of couple of questions left about the support available.
Yep.
When will the recordings be available?
We're hoping to get these out as soon as possible. We just need to kind of work through in terms of best way of doing so, whether we're going to put them in as two separate ones, so then again, or whether we're going to kind of amalgamate, because essentially we've had the first part was very similar between both sessions that we had yesterday and today. So we're just going to work out internally the best way of doing so, but we'll endeavour to get those out as quickly as possible. So hopefully it might be next week if we can.
Okay. Will we build these the answers to the questions or things we talked about? Will we build those into FAQs and share them later?
Yes, that is absolutely the intention. So obviously anything that we either don't manage to cover today, or anything where we've had kind of reoccurring themes, one of the things that we've actually got a meeting in tomorrow internally is to go through kind of our questions and say, right, does that mean that we actually need to put some more information specifically on our website that's not necessarily FAQ, or whether they do need to be specific FAQs? So yeah, we certainly are using all the questions that are coming in to make sure that we've got all the information that's needed available to you at all times.
Just a quick question about sign-off dates for the retrospective return and then the first in-year submission. Any certainty about these dates?
So we've got the certainty on the dates for the retrospective return on the new model and the new platform. So they will be in October. And then we will have a delivery in early November to our customers. In terms of the in-year data, kind of, I know, appreciate that then becomes very close to the sort of proposed dates that we have for in year at the moment. That is something that is still has a question mark about it because of the we haven't yet got the outcomes of the burden review from the OFS, but we are taking into consideration actually that the likelihood is if obviously they do stay as they are, or that first reference period stays in a similar kind of time frame, that they will be looked to, that we would relax the sign-off period, so it would be later in the year. So again, you've got the reference period dates themselves, which reference period date would likely stay the same, or we would be clear with what they are. So that would be from the 1st of August for 2023, but we would then go to a position that actually the sign-off period possibly wouldn't stay in December. We would look to relax that quite considerably, because so that you're not having to do both returns at the same time. But that is still obviously very heavily caveated with, obviously we don't have the outcomes of the burden review yet. We are still working. We'll, as soon as we get them, we'll be able to work through exactly what the impact would be and make sure that we're in a position that we're not expecting you to do both at the same time.
Quick question that I can answer. Should they contact the usual liaison at Heaster address, or is there a different one? No, please just email a liaison. We're trying to treat this as business as usual, how we deal with all your queries. So yeah, pop it to the usual liaison address, and we'll get back to you with that. And then one final question about support. What opportunities will be available for institutions to share experience, forums or a team site? It'd be valuable to see what other questions people have and the responses given.
Yep, so appreciate obviously in Alpha it was a slightly different setup because we were a much smaller group of providers, so we only had 14. Obviously now we're at over 130 and still growing, so it becomes something that's very difficult for us to kind of manage and have that same kind of one-on-one interaction. So we have looked at, we'd previously had a Teams channel with Alpha. We had considered whether we would do that for Beta. It's obviously unfortunately quite a big overhead for us internally within HESA to make sure that we've got another place for that to be managed. But it's something that we want to take consideration about actually how we can share and make sure that there is that kind of collaborative working, and people can share questions and ideas with each other. We would look to kind of repeat similar sessions like we have done today at the end of each release to sort of say what we found useful, what did we not find useful, but we're not going to be able to do it on quite the same scale we had necessarily done with Alpha. We had sort of weekly, fortnightly drop-in sessions, which again becomes very difficult, and there's a lot of overhead that we don't necessarily have all the capacity to do as much as we would love to, because we found them really, really helpful. So yeah, we will certainly take certainly something that's on our list of things to try and consider the best way that we can try and support that and facilitate that. Without it, basically, it would mean it's just we haven't necessarily got the full capacity to be able to do it in the same way we did for Alpha for the scale of people that we have. But yes, we'll certainly take that. I know that this came up again at the session yesterday, so we'll certainly take that one away and try and work through whatever way we can to help facilitate that.
Lovely. Well, that's all the questions we've had asked. So thank you everyone who did ask. And just a reminder, get in touch whenever you think of anything to the normal liaison email, and either we'll know or we'll find out for you.
Thanks, Kate. So yeah, we've got a minute left. So if anyone does have any other questions, do feel free to either pop them in the chat or raise your hand. But if not, the recordings will be available. So we'll get them. Endeavour to get them out as quickly as possible for you, so you can come back to them. And yeah, thank you very much for your time and for your patience and with all of our questions as well. And yeah, the questions have been really, really useful for us, and we'll make sure that we try, for any that we haven't answered, we'll try and get responses out to you as soon as we can. So yeah, thank you very much for your time, and have a lovely rest of the afternoon.
Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.